Hi everyone, welcome to another catch up with Tom and David and the Eximius executive team. We've had another one of your questions come in. This week we've been asked, what are the biggest pitfalls we should watch out for in returning to the office? Great question, and thank you to everyone who keeps writing in with those questions. We love being challenged on them. So David, what's the one thing at the moment you're looking out for on a return to an office situation?
I think it's really clarity. I've just seen a few companies recently completely fudge how they're bringing people back to the office. So, some companies saying, well, we expect people to come back a couple of days a week, but not saying they have to come back 2 days a week. And then you sort of have other companies that are sort of, no, you have to be in on these days, or you have to be whatever. And it's just, I think the lack of clarity really doesn't help. So you need a really clear vision of what when people are expected in, what that really looks like, and what the very, very clear parameters on that, I think, because I think ambiguity is painful in these situations, because then lots of people go, oh, well, I thought it was just a suggestion to come back. I didn't realize I actually had to come back and see people and have meetings, which is a bad thing. So I don't know if that directly answers the question, but that is certainly something that would be massively something to look out for. It's just, avoid ambiguity.
Yeah, some of the biggest corporates I know have used the language, we invite you back for 2 days a week. Yeah. And that is about as grey as it gets, right? Yeah. You could politely decline their invitation to their party and stay at home. So I think getting that clarity is the key there. Tom, what have you seen so far? What's the thing that's worrying you on the return?
Yeah, I think, Nick, I'd different angle on this just for a change. I think it's what's the problem we're trying to fix. So I think the challenge is, putting it bluntly, is believing our own lies, Nick, right, in terms of the challenge in the workplace. So, what keeps us on track and what keeps us on a line is actually the interaction with other people. So if you look at what's happened over the last 544 days, which is 8.4 times the length of time it creates to create a permanent habit. I think what Jordan Peterson says, our thoughts become facts unless they're challenged. So how does that manifest itself? I've just been speaking to a VC client of mine, and the way that manifests itself is when you ask a difficult question in due diligence, the whole thing blows up, right? Because that you're encroaching on someone's flawed belief that they don't want to justify. And this is an example of people becoming fragile. So I think where the money is, it's about valuing the space in between our thoughts. So you've got your position, Nick, on what you do. I've got my position. David's got his. It's that gap in between where we disagree, which is where the money is. And I think that's exactly the opposite of what's happening at the moment. So, I've said this many times, but I'll say it again. Relationships are absolutely critical. And I don't being nice to people, but I mean just finding a way to be ourselves and maintain our well-being. And I think, the challenge for a lot of leaders is that, talking about, going back to normal, actually, that's in complete denial of what's actually taken place, because I think rightly so, people's purpose has been ripped to pieces. The meaning in businesses, there's this challenge with technology, which I think has left a lot of businesses utterly flawed. And so a lot of businesses that you would work in, Nick, I wouldn't, because of my background and the viability of some of those businesses. And I think even at the most basic level, there's two sort of triggers here, fear and pride. And do we even recognize fear and pride? Do we actually know what that looks like? And they're the two critical triggers which prevent us from actually moving forwards and developing ourselves. And I think the last bit of data, I could quite a lot of thoughts on this, but the last bit of data I'd contribute, which is quite concerning, is that there was a survey done recently on the number of people that felt they were qualified to cope with this situation, given everything that's taken place. And they said 87% of people could cope with this and they're absolutely fine. And 64% said they were working more alone. And that is very unhealthy, because that's nothing more than hubris, right? So I think there's a fragility And this really only comes out when things get difficult. So it's all very well bumbling along, right? You can bumble along, but actually when something difficult happens, Nick, and I think there are a lot of difficult things happening, a lot of very flawed businesses, the fact is that people are not putting the hand up. And so in a nutshell, that's what I've tried to describe as being part of the problem, Nick, that's going back to work, so that whatever that solution is about really developing relationships. So I don't really give it, and I mean that has to be done face to face. And we, interesting enough, we haven't, we said we we're going to get together in September, and we haven't face to face. And I think we really ought to make the time to do that.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's what it comes down to. Without which, I think we're in delusion, Nick. And if you listen to I listen to the dialogue, and technology dialogue, the woke dialogue, and it really concerns me that people are not aware of this, and it's things that people aren't aware of that concern me more than ever, because they're not going to see the risk, and they can get caught out very badly.
Yeah, no. Some super insightful points there, Tom. David, how firm are people meant to be on this return policy? So you were talking about clarity earlier. I mean, I think a few people are finding they're saying we're going to do 3 days a week, and they're a week into it going like, not sure it's as productive as we thought it's going to be.
In terms of they're doing 3 days a week and people are less productive than they were, or they're not as productive as they wanted them to be in 3 days a week?
I think they're finding, the management team, some of them are finding that they're not as productive as they can be, and they're being questioned on whether 3 days a week is viable, really working, and they're struggling to come back with the answers to say why it really works, right?
Yep.
And you're seeing people already loosening from their fairly tight stance. So is it more of a case of management know best and like they need to persist with that sort of narrative, or is it about being open and actually listening and changing and adapting right now?
Yeah, I think that probably the first point is it comes down to a period of readjustment. So as Tom was saying, we've got used to working from home. Lots of people have, and it's a lot easier. You can get out of bed an hour and a half later. You can watch a lot more Netflix in the evening because you don't have to get up at 5:45 to get a 6:30 train into London or whatever it is. Like, we've got used to this pattern of behaviour. So now when everyone's going back into the office, there's going to be a period of readjustment as people socialise more, they chat more. Maybe that efficiency isn't quite there at the moment. And particularly for managers, I always say to the managers I work with, it's just differentiating the important from the urgent. And I suspect at the moment, when there's lots and lots of people coming back into the office, a lot of their time is taken up with offline chats, or, can we have a chat about, my career and, future in the company, and all those conversations that weren't probably really happening during lockdown and now happening because people are back around. And therefore, the managers are being less productive with their time. That is a readjustment phase, and again, it's worth being aware of that, but also managing that. But also, that doesn't mean then that the idea is fundamentally flawed. If you don't have a couple of, if a couple of weeks in, you're like, well, I'm not sure about this. I think there has to be a period of readjustment, and also then really communicating what that time is for. Like, what's the value add to know. I don't think retrain is the right word, but then shifting people from working at home to working in the office. What's the benefit to the company, the benefit to them of doing that? As in, what are they going to do more in the office that they can't do at home? So I think it's really planning that in the office time and really leverage that, making it as productive and as useful as they can. But I'm sure Tom's got far better ideas than I have on how to do that.
Tom, same question for you.
Yeah. David's made some good points there. I think there's this notion of efficiency, Nick. So, I'm really reluctant to go to London now, although, I did actually last week, and I only managed 2 meetings in the afternoon, and a lot of travelling and not much else. So I think my experience of actually going back to work or developing teams is you have to create a space for people to get together. And frankly, you have to force that because people don't naturally coagulate in teams. You have to create that structure yourself, because there's a lot of fear around that, particularly in this environment of that people won't overcome. That just doesn't happen. So, but I think the challenge with this actually, Nick, is a bit different, which is I think CEOs. I think I talked a bit about purpose and meaning before in tech companies and other companies. It just isn't. It just doesn't hold water. So I think CEOs really are not in a good position to call the shots because they haven't really got a leg to stand on and they haven't learned enough from the reset that's taken place, Nick. So I don't think that a CEO can really say, you're coming in for 2 days a week without really being very absolutely clear that it's the right thing to do. Because, if people, and as you're dealing with individuals, and individuals' lives have been turned upside down spiritually, all kinds of ways during this period of time. And I think and most people, frankly, most people have frankly, I think, really questioned whether or not they want to work for these organizations. So, and it's not as an organization can only offer what it can offer. So I think, what's the solution? Because we talked about what should we be doing or the pitfall, but I think the solution is something like re-establishing relationships, refinding ourselves, open, safe communications, and really getting back to that as a bridge to actually even define the strategy as to how many days a week that people come in. But I mean, I think there is something around the transactional side of what people do, but I don't think there is much in businesses that is transactional, because when I'm leading change or businesses or difficult situations, I notice that people think they're making progress, but without the communication, Nick, and the open communication, not on Zoom, but the face-to-face bumping into each other, having a bit of a laugh, that informal and formal communication, people just go off and do stuff and it goes all over the place. When I look at some big tech companies, which will remain nameless, that you and I know really well, you can see that strategy manifesting itself very clearly, and people don't know how to get grip of that. So cutting to the chase, I mean, the winning thinking thing is about shining a light into different perspectives and people taking new action. And it's almost taking new action for the sake of it, to develop new to reset relationships and actually break us out of this cycle, Nick. So I think it's, not to invest in ourselves, to manage this process with humility, because I think as a CEO, you cannot bang the drum. You don't know where people are, Nick. You don't know, I don't know if your cat's just died, or whatever matters to you. And I think people are very fragile, as I tried to describe before, that they're really very uncomfortable in having difficult conversations, and that's got a lot more difficult. And people are much more, even people that I've known, actually, I've noticed how, I've become much more introverted, and less willing to operate in that space between it, that uncomfortable space of, you think this, I say that. I like, let's acknowledge the difference, but let's explore that difference, not with a view to changing people's minds, but to really understand each other. I think people haven't got the love for each other at the moment to do that, and that's just not healthy. So I think there's a lot of humility to get this right. I think it's very difficult. I think it's really, when people say going back to normal, it scares the hell out of me, Nick, because going back to normal in this situation is hyper stressful. Because you're hyper misaligning people. So and it's also disregarding what's happened over the last 18 months, which is just absurd. So, the notion of going back to the office for 5 days a week, let's say, and going back to normal, whatever, just is absurd. So pretty concerned about it. But I think it's humility and professional development and real focus on developing relationships, Nick. And, that's what...
So would you stand firm on a period of time of keeping to, let's say, 2-3 days a week, just so people can get back into that routine of trying to forge relationships again, and then maybe review if it's really working?
Yeah, I would. First of all, I'd come at it with a very humble perspective if I was a chief exec of a large company, which I'm not at the moment, but I've got, I've got a lot of involvement in different things, which is the reason why I'm saying this. But I would have come at it with a lot of humility, unbelievable amount, actually, just, almost with a blank sheet of paper. And I would say, and I would force people to come in, right, Nick, because you have to. I'd say every Monday and Tuesday, I want you guys to come in with the sole purpose for us to define this strategy, to try and get this right, and also during that process to start re-establishing normal communication, and coffee, informal, and just talk absolute nonsense. Encourage people to talk about the cats, dogs, cycling, whatever people enjoy doing, to get dialogue back, and then to use that period to acknowledge the utter terror of this period of time, and to, frankly, reset the meaning. And I'd also shut down, if I was investing in a lot of these tech businesses, I'd shut them down as well, because I really, it's that bad. So I think there's a really, really serious delusion happening at the moment that somehow this business is okay, and people are still talking about, deploying the same values and all this stuff, when actually the values could be completely shot out and utterly irrelevant because what's happened. So I think real serious humility, phase of bringing people into the office, whether they like it or not, on a Monday and Tuesday, let's say, with a view to create a core team to really figure out, but with a real degree of humility and love, Nick, because, forcing everybody to come back to the office 5 days a week, you're going to have a riot on your hands, because one, your credibility as a chief exec is zero. And if it is anything more than zero, we talk about, the imposter syndrome as being a bad thing. Imposter syndrome is the biggest dose of reality that we should all face in this situation. The concept that we think we have got the silver bullets, and we're likely to get that certainty and get this right in even a short space of time, is so humility beyond belief, Nick, real sensitivity, real love for people, but with a real sense of dialogue. And I also fire a lot of people that encourages woke dialogue, because you haven't got time for that. I would be ruthless in terms of taking people out with the wrong. And that's the other thing that's going on, because the temptation here is to, the wokeness is all about victimhood, and that's the way you cope, and that's a very easy way out. But you need to make sure you're encouraging the people who actually have got freedom of thought and courage to drive this forwards, because those people will get trampled on, and they're the people who will leave, and you'll be left with a load of wokies, if you're not careful, who will make a real mess of the business. So this is not an easy time. This is why upskilling is critical. It's the reason why I've written 2 books on this. It's just, it really needs understanding.
Yeah. No, we've approached this as, it almost feels like we're a Pokemon, sort of always evolving and upgrading. So we're seeing this as our business. We're calling it 3.0 because it's just changed so much. Like it's completely rewriting the script and getting everyone in the mindset of like, this is different, because there are people in our business who desperately want it 100% back to how it was, and it will frustrate them because that will take a long time to get there. I do think it probably will get near there, but it's never going to be the same feeling. And like, I think you've got to feel for people who really want that back in their lives, right? I think that's an issue. I also think on the plus side, though, there's a sort of arbitrage opportunity here where you've got a load of people are getting in the office, sitting there doing their thing. They're not getting out meeting people again. And I think the excitement you get from meeting people and being the first back out there, having social interactions with people is huge, especially if you're in any kind of sales, consulting, partnership, sort of client engagement position. It's just a great opportunity to go and see people, just through that, just because it's different and new and exciting. But Tom, some great points there. David, as a closing part, anything else you think is a pitfall we should be sort of looking out for at the moment with the return?
I think, just to sort of echo Tom's stuff, is just listen to what your staff are saying. It doesn't mean they're right. You'll just get a barometer of where they're at mentally, emotionally, and just really stay connected. And I think that'll help the transition to whatever that next phase is for a business. But I just think really, really take the time to listen, to understand, to empathize, and also that'll help with the kind of the leading side there. And picking up on some of the stuff that Tom was saying about credibility, it'll really help lead people back to where you want them to go. So I think just really listen to where people are at. That'd be my closing remark.
Perfect. There's a good way to finish there. Well, thanks to everyone at home. Again, another great question in there. If you want to reach out to any of the experts at Exim Executive, one of Europe's leading growth coaching turnaround specialists here, like please let us know. There's a plethora of questions we get asked every day. We're doing some incredibly diverse work across a range of exciting clients, from early stage to absolute monsters. It's all exciting, but keep the questions coming in. Thank you for all the support, and we will catch up again very soon. Thank you, guys. Take care.